Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a Learning and Growing webinar series on developing a social justice OER. Our presenter today is Professor Kaylin Green of SUNY Empire State College. My name is Sidra, and I'll be your moderator today for Hawks Learning. We will have a live Q&A session after the presentation, so please enter any questions you have into our Q&A module as we go, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end. I'll now hand it over to our presenter.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. My name is Dr. Kaylin Green. I'm the Assistant Professor of Addiction Studies at SUNY Empire State College. I'm going to share my screen here. Here we go. Okay, so let me start this. So developing a social justice OER. I wanted to first kind of introduce, for those who may not be aware of what an OER is. An OER stands for an open education resource. Essentially, think of this as a free textbook that professionals in the field may write a book, a resource, a pamphlet, whatever length it may be, and they publish it with the essence of it being free for anyone to access. The goal of open education resources, or OERs, is to try to incorporate them more into college level courses to bring the cost of registration on that class down. Students may receive financial aid to pay for classes, but textbooks can be very pricey. So I'm a big supporter of trying to use and developing and using free resources when possible for college level classes. Specifically, the reason why I'm working with a team to create this social justice open education resource. The school that I work for, SUNY Empire State College, is currently in the process of creating a social justice and equity and diversity general education requirement. So general education requirements, those are classes that help the students develop a strong base on which to specialize their education. Usually these general education requirements include math, communications, natural science, social science, history, world literature, humanities, the arts. And most colleges have a requirement of all students having to take a certain amount of credits that will fulfill those requirements to create a well-rounded student. As the social climate changes, we have found that basic information regarding social justice situations, responses, and advocacy are just as important as basic skills of math, communications, and American history. So SUNY is on the forefront of creating a new general education requirement about social justice, diversity, and equity type of situations. Specifically, we are in the middle of developing a class in the School of Human Services where I work on the curriculum is going to be called Social Justice and Advocacy in Human Service Professions. And the goal is for this class to be able to meet that social justice new general education requirement. In order to get this to count for those general education requirement, we do have to follow very strict guidelines, right? We can't just create a class and have it count for a general education requirement. Those are very specific. The rubric for and the outline for the social justice diversity class, in order for it to meet the general education requirement, these outcomes in the diversity and social justice rubric below, they're designed to be foundational and adaptable to multiple disciplines. This means the expectation is that many departments in our college will be able to create new courses that will be able to incorporate these rubric guidelines to meet the new social justice education requirement. So the rubric currently includes the class must describe the historical and contemporary social society factors that shape the development of individual and group identity involving race, class, and gender. The class must analyze the role that complex networks of social structures and systems play in the creation and perpetuation of the dynamics of power, privilege, oppression, and opportunity. And the class must also apply the principles of rights, access, equity, and autonomous participation in past, current, or future social justice actions. So essentially, our class in human services will focus on these rubric requirements, as well as bringing in our own learning objectives focused in the School of Human Services and and community human service type of jobs. A math class, a history class, a humanities class, a foreign language class, they're all going to be able to develop a class regarding focusing on their area of expertise, as long as they're able to incorporate these 3 rubric hits. If they're able to incorporate these 3 rubric hits, the class then will be able to count for that general education requirement. And because this general education requirement is fairly new, we need to develop quite a few classes for students to have the option of taking. So how we got to developing the OER, after creating our team and going, we're going to make a class to meet this general education requirement that also kind of works with our School of Human Services focus as well. Why did we decide to throw a textbook in there to write as well, right? Why are we adding more work for ourselves? So part of equity and inclusion is working towards making college education accessible for a wider range of students. And when we bring the topic of textbooks, we were searching for textbooks to use to help lead our process in the curriculum development. The textbooks were expensive. That's the reality of it. So having expensive textbooks creates an atmosphere where some students may shy away from advancing their academic due to out-of-pocket costs. While they may have loans or job reimbursement for the classes, for the class costs themselves, not always those costs of that funding will cover the cost of textbooks. And if we have a student who is already living paycheck to paycheck, perhaps has children at home, family members they're caring for, that extra $100, $200, $300 a term of textbooks makes that class now unobtainable for them. It's quite a barrier for a lot of students. So we decided to stay true to our social justice and equity inclusion framework regarding the curriculum. So we would create a free open education resource for instructors to use for this social justice course. But we're also designing this textbook to be able to be used for most general social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion-based courses, as well as the ones with a human service professional lens. Our goal is to write this textbook in a way that a social justice class in history, in natural science, in humanities, in the arts, would be able to access this free, publicly published textbook and adjust it according to their field specific course. That way, the majority of the background work has been done for them. They can maybe adjust a couple of chapters or a part of the book to be more honed to their specific situation, and then use this free textbook again for their classes as well. So as we're developing this, the goal is for it to be used not just for our class, but the goal is to create the scaffolding to be used for any other class at any college that wants to try to incorporate this with a free textbook resource. So how are we organizing this OER? Me and my partner are kind of spearheading the organization and the writing of the OER, and then a couple of our other teammates are focusing on the curriculum development. So the OER organization, we have decided to cut it into 4 parts. The first part is understanding social justice. Again, this is one of those broader parts that any class and any school could use. This is the big picture, kind of the macro approach. This includes the basics such as power, privilege, oppression, unconscious bias, and human rights. This goes into some history about it. It focuses on definitions, but really introducing the student at a very basic level what social justice is, what components create social justice or stand in the way of social justice. Part 2 is community action and activism. This is the meso piece, kind of policy, legislation, community action, and such of this. This is another piece that is designed to be used by any program, any field or any school that wants a social justice class. They might want to adjust some of the some of the legislation to be focused on their field specifics, but we are thinking about this in a broader approach so it can be utilized for other schools and other departments. Part 3, working with the community. This is the who we serve, the who the social justice is really impacting. We will go into detail on the specifics of our populations and the issues they face on a daily basis. This is kind of the part that starts to get a little specific regarding human services, but we're still going to keep it as broad as we can to bring in humans in general. This will be very easy for another department to bring in and again, tweak little pieces of it if they wish to make it more field specific to whatever population of people they are serving, to focus the content on that. We are focusing our content on human service professions, counseling, clinical work, things of that nature. And then part 4, this is the human service specific component of this textbook. Essentially, if you're creating a social justice class in humanities, you would take this whole part out and replace this part with a part of the book that you wrote yourself as the instructor, that your school maybe wrote, or perhaps you found another free resource that you can use to use alongside of the first 3 parts of this textbook. So this is the human service specific piece. This is where we get into the specifics of how theories and issues play out in the human service field. We'll go into some case study approaches. We'll have a lot of examples regarding human service professions and how those situations look, play out, or get created in the human service professional field specifically. So the OER components. We are working very closely with our librarians for support and guidance through this project. We're actually reaching out to not just our librarians, but other colleges' librarians to get input on what type of resources they currently have on social justice, what kind of OERs they do, how we can use the library for proper publication so that not just we use this book, but for other schools, departments in our college, but other schools can access this as well. So as we are starting the writing process, we are already thinking about that long-term approach of how are we going to share this OER for it to be used as much as possible to, again, that end goal is to create education that is as more widely accessible to the students who need it. We're researching multiple possible platforms to publish it on completely for free. We will be using a Creative Commons publication. So we are going to be comfortable with anybody downloading this OER textbook and changing anything they want in it. Nothing will be off limits. Anyone can adjust and kind of tweak anything they want to make it specific and fit for the class that they're going to be teaching. Some publication platforms that we're playing around with right now include WordPress and Google Docs. We want to find the one that is the easiest for accessibility for students, but also is accessible for instructors to find. So we're playing around with that, and the librarians are helping us figure out what makes the most sense for us specifically for this textbook. How do we want to be published? Do we want other instructors to be able to change it for their own classes? Again, the answer is yes. We want anyone to be able to download it and tweak it as they see fit. This will open that usability for instructors to say, hey, it may not be exactly what I want, but I can change those couple of pieces. I can make one simple part and make it usable for the curriculum that they are developing. Rules on pictures and content. Through this process, we are learning a lot about how to use Creative Commons effectively, rules on citations, where we can pull content from, where we want to pull content from, trusted content, right? And also, almost just as importantly, where we cannot pull content from and why we don't want to pull it from certain places. So in this process, it's not just us writing a textbook, but we are learning about how all these pieces come together while we're in the midst of writing. So how are we doing it? We have a team of 5 professors who are actively working on this project together. We started this project at the end of November, and the goal for the curriculum to be developed and the OER, at least rough draft, to be completed is the end of May, early June. And there's a reason why we have such a quick turnaround deadline for that for ourselves, right? Usually OERs could take up to a year or more to properly put together and published. And we have a reason why we're kind of moving forward a little quicker on that, and I'll explain in a second. Two, we are focusing on the curriculum development and the learning objectives. So we're focusing really on not just the objectives for the sense of the human service department, but again, we have to make sure we're properly incorporating those social justice general education rubric guidelines. So if the class does not meet those 3 rubric guidelines, the school is not going to approve for it to count to satisfy that social justice general education requirement. So we have a lot of different pieces of the puzzle that we have to bring together for it to properly count the way we want it to count. This isn't just another class we're building. This class has to meet certain requirements for it to be all that our goal is for it to be. Two of us are focused on the curriculum development. 2 of us are focused on the OER creation and publication, and then 1 is the overseer. One of our team members, they're not currently involved in any of the writing or development. Their role is to oversee, make sure things stay in line, make sure we're meeting all of our target deadlines, making sure we're moving properly forward. And so the reason why we have such a quick 6-month turnaround for the curriculum as well as the OER is right before the holidays of 2022, we decided to incorporate a little extra fun into this project specifically. We worked together to fulfill a mini grant that our school is offering for projects regarding social justice and diversity. Due to this, and we were awarded that grant, which is wonderful. The grant's actually going to be supporting us presenting at a couple of around the country's conferences on this topic. So the hard work for the grant was definitely done for good reasons, being put to very good use to share this information on a larger scale. But because of this grant, now we have a time frame for the OER. So the grant, everything that's completed to be count for the grant has to be completed by middle or end of June. So we have to complete the curriculum and the OER, at least the basics of the OER, to prove to the grant committee that we fulfilled our responsibility of the grant. We do plan on beefing the OER up, putting pictures in, putting in extra resources after the grant piece is closed out, but we need to have something to show the grant committee that we have upheld our end of the bargain, and we can then receive that grant money. So we're very excited to be able to, kind of put our foot to the pedal and complete this project in the timeline we have, but also the opportunity to be able to share this project on that larger scale. Hopefully more schools will see what we're doing and say, hey, maybe we should start thinking about a social justice general education requirement. And if so, how can we create that information to be more accessible for the students? So I would now like to open the floor to questions or thoughts or any feedback. Again, we are kind of in the midst of this project, so any thoughts or feedback would be appreciated. I would love to incorporate that as well.
Now is the time. You can go ahead and drop your questions in the Q&A module, and we will do our best to answer them. We do have one question so far. Oh, now we have 2.
Oh.
Chat is disabled, but you can put your questions in the Q&A module, and we can answer your questions there. I can also open up the chat so that everyone can message. Oh, you wanted to share your resources. Okay.
Oh, thank you so much, TL Brink. I appreciate those. I'm gonna copy and save those right now. Thank you. Yeah, our librarian is fantastic. But they only know what they know, right? So the more we can talk about this type of project, the more we can gather information on what works for other people as well.
Yep, I just put them in the chat so other people
Beautiful.
can
Thank you.
use them as well. We do have another question. How do you think this OER will impact student registration to the
Oh,
class?
wonderful. Thank you. The goal is to make it known that this class, this specific social justice in the human service professions class, does not come with any additional resources to purchase. So we want to make that kind of publicly aware for our students. And the goal, and hopefully it'll raise the registration rates for students to perhaps choose to fulfill this general education requirement over a foreign language or over humanities, because those classes might also include additional purchase textbooks. And if the students know, hey, if I have to pick one general education requirement to fulfill, why not pick the one that doesn't have any additional costs attached to it? So not just the sense of a student registering for the class and going, oh, well, that's nice. I don't have to buy anything else. Fantastic. But to hopefully encourage students to choose the social justice general education requirement to fulfill because they know there is no additional cost on their end for this.
Thank you. So there is a comment/question. Your university sounds like it was supportive of the social justice focus. Why, and did you have to do any selling of it as a gen ed course?
Great question. So I don't think it was so much having to sell it as a gen ed course, but I think it has to do with previously my school didn't have a social justice general education requirement. We had set 10 general education areas. Students have to meet 7 of those 10. So we have lots of social justice types of classes in general, but we didn't have the requirement that those would fulfill one of those areas. So now we're going to have 11 general education areas, and students will get to pick 7 of those 11 areas. So a student will have the opportunity to choose social justice over natural science if they so wish. So I had to go through quite a bit of layers as changing any academic program has. We had to think about, had to go to like 4 different committees. The provost had to approve of it. So there's a lot of paperwork behind how and why we create certain general education requirements, and then how to make a rubric for classes to count for that. Because it's general education, there are very specific guidelines that classes have to meet. Not all classes meet general education requirements. In fact, many do not. The teachers have to put in quite a bit of additional work to make sure we hit those rubric guidelines for it to satisfy that general education requirement.
Thank you. Do you know why your university is so supportive of the social justice focus?
So we are a state school. We are the State University of New York, Empire State College. So majority of our students, we focus on students that maybe haven't been able to complete college for a variety of reasons at other times in their life. We have a lot of older generation students who have been in the workforce for many, many years and now want to come back to get their degree, to change career fields, or maybe to get a promotion in their career. So because of that, we have a wide, diverse variety of students. So we see these social justice issues in our student population. We see students speaking about them, discussing them in the online discussion boards, in group topics. So I think we saw it as it's a part of our student body climate. So why not address it as an actual class, right? If we have students who are interested and passionate about a topic, why can't they get college credit for learning more in-depthly about that? We also pride ourselves on prior learning assessment, which means students can get college level credit for their career field and skills that they've been practicing in their career field for a set number of years. So I think we kind of attach that with the idea of we have students who are passionate about certain social justice topics. Why not create a field where they can earn college level credit to learn more about those topics?
That sounds fantastic. So we have one additional comment. In addition to a quote unquote textbook, could we also consider doing a wiki, which could be continuously expanded and updated, adding new topics, data, theory, etc.? For example, my focus is healthcare inequities, and the studies in that field are developing rapidly.
Absolutely. Wiki is one of those platforms where you can publish whatever you want. So essentially you would create the page, and then as your required resources for the class, you would list your wiki page. So it's just a way of collecting that information, but then sharing it, right? If you put all this work into creating a resource, a textbook, a web page for your class, don't just hoard the information, share it with whoever wants to hear about it. You know, maybe a school out in Kansas is writing a class on a similar topic, but they don't know what book to use. You can say, hey, use mine. It's a website. It's offered for free. I update it. Feel free to update it yourself if you want to. But sharing these resources, that's how we create a more well-rounded approach as well. If only one person's writing it, you only get my perspective. So by offering it in that Creative Commons or that open publication platform, you will allow someone else to then take it, adjust it accordingly, improve upon it, and then put it back out there for the world to use.
That's so exciting. Are you expecting any pushback from the influences that are objecting to the subject matter like this? For example, Florida?
Great question. So our school is not in Florida, it's in New York. So honestly, we're not too concerned about pushback on our end. Other schools may have some pushback regarding them wanting to move forward and include this type of content. I can't control that, unfortunately. All I can do is advocate for what we feel is going to create a more well-rounded student general education requirement experience. And even at that, this class will not be required. It will not be a required general education requirement. It will be one of the 11 options for students to choose 7 out of. So a student could still get their bachelor's degree from us and not take a class in social justice or in diversity. That would be their choice. But we wanted to leave it open for students to be able to earn college level credit if they're so inclined to learn more and dive into that topic.
Thank you. Do you have any closing remarks?
I want to thank everyone who has attended this webinar. This is a topic that is very important to me. I'm very excited about this project, and the more I can talk and share about it, people will become aware of it. Start looking for the OER, start Googling it, hopefully in July. That's the goal, for it to be out there in June, July. So feel free to Google it, download it, adjust it accordingly, and use it in whatever way you see fit for you and your student population, please.
All right, awesome. All right, that looks like all the time we have for today. Thank you, Kaylin, and thank you all for attending today. If you or any of your fellow instructors are interested in presenting for our Learning and Growing webinar series, please submit your proposals to the Learning and Growing website, which I'm going to go ahead and link in the chat now for easy access. And we will be emailing you a link of the recording once the webinar is available. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you.